Baseball fans, it is time once again for another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. With over 50 years in professional baseball and making a multitude of fantastic relationships along the way, Frank Coppenbarger shares great stories with weekly guests from various areas inside of the game. It's all here on the Fans First Sports Network. Let's get ready to play ball. Here's Frank Coppenbarger. Welcome once again to Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. My name is Bryan Anthony Davis. I'm not the guy who usually opens the show. It's the man on the screen with me, Frank Coppenbarger. That is your show. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, Bryan. How are you today?
Very good, thanks. So we are just in a situation where our guest is not here this week, and we decided that, hey, let's catch up. The World Series and the playoffs just ended, and gave me a lot of questions, Frank. What does a clubhouse manager do when his team is in the World Series? Do things change? So we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're also going to talk about one of the most fascinating World Series I have ever seen, and I've seen a lot of them. I've seen every single World Series since 1979, and I think this goes up in my top 5, Frank.
Well, we know which one your top one was. It was 79 because you're a Pirate fan.
Absolutely. But I'm very partial to 1991. Twins and Braves, I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think this one had more drama than every one that I've seen.
It was pretty crazy. So do you want to start with that, or you want to talk about
1 through 7? There's so much action here. Who were you rooting for? Can you tell me that?
Well, this time I was actually rooting for Toronto. We the Phillies are trained in Clearwater, and Dunedin is 10 minutes away. So for many years, the travel director and the clubhouse guys for the Blue Jays and I were all close. We were all buddies. And, they beat us in 93. So, they had a championship there. They actually won it in 92 and 93. But this year, I was rooting for Toronto mostly because one of the players, Dalton Varsho on the Blue Jays, he kind of grew up in our clubhouse. His father, Gary Varsho, was a player first with the Phillies, and later on was a coach for a couple different managers, Larry Boa and Charlie Manuel. And little Dalton was in the clubhouse. He was probably 7, 8 years old, running around the clubhouse in his little Philly uniform and, taking fly balls out on the field and all that kind of stuff. So to now see him as a big league, not only a big league player, a Gold Glove outfielder. He won the Gold Glove in center field in 2024. And just to see him play and be a regular in the lineup, I was rooting for them this time.
Absolutely. And yeah, I was also. Typically, I think the American fan likes to see somebody new in there. So I would think that if you weren't a Dodgers fan, that you were probably rooting for Toronto, unless you're a division rival that doesn't want to see them in there. But when it was all said and done, even though I was rooting for Toronto, I'm like, I stood up, I clapped. I was all by myself. Everyone was asleep. They just put on one for the ages.
Well, you mentioned the late hour, and they did. It was a great World Series. Somebody had to lose, unfortunately, and it was oh so close. It could have been the other way, just an inch or two. But you talk about the late hour. I usually go to bed between 10 and 10:30 at night nowadays, and I stayed up and watched all 18 innings of that game. I stayed with it till 2:30 in the morning. I had to get up, walk around the living room a few times. But, one thing I would like to see different, and it'll never happen, but I think the weekend games should be day games. I think the young kids don't really grasp how big the World Series is. that's the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup championship or the NBA finals for baseball. And the biggest games, the young fans they're not even able to stay up and watch them on school nights. And some of them can't stay up that late on any night. So I kind of wish the day game would come back on at least one game be a day game on like a Saturday or a Sunday. I know it'll never happen. When I was with St. Louis in '87, that was the last day game played in the World Series, Game 6. It was a
Wow.
Saturday afternoon. To think about that is almost 40 years ago.
Yeah, I remember watching that because I was enamored with the Twins at the time.
Not me, but I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yes. And I understand that.
In fact, that day game was a bad game. We had the lead and relinquished it, and they came back and beat us, and then beat us the next night. So we had to check back in the hotel in Minnesota. We were up 3-2 and had the lead in Game 6, not to get off this year's World Series. But, the way we did things with the Cardinals, if it was a clinching day, we checked out of the hotel. We packed the bags when the game started, and we intended to win. And when we didn't win, we had to unpack all those bags and get the luggage truck back to the hotel. And traveling secretary had to go over there and get keys made for every room and hand them out to everybody. And we were back in the hotel for another night. And that hotel was right downtown in Minneapolis, and the cars were driving around the block honking the horns all night long, and I haven't forgotten it.
Oh, well, I could imagine. I'm sorry I brought up.
No, it's all right. I've been on that bad side four of the 6 World Series I was in, but grateful to have been in 6 World Series, and this year's World Series. It was so stressful. I was kind of glad I wasn't in it anymore. A lot of stress.
Absolutely imagine. When I ask you a couple more questions about this World Series, then we'll go ahead and we'll take a break, and then we'll come on back. But let me go ahead and ask you, because there were some, I don't want to call it controversy, but I thought there was some very smart gamesmanship by the Dodgers center fielder by putting his hands up right away. It's the smartest thing you could do.
Yeah.
But was that ball lodged?
It looked really like it to me, because it was a pretty much a high fly ball that when it landed, you would think it would short hop the fence, or it would bounce off the fence and roll back towards the left fielder or the center fielder, and it didn't. It wedged right underneath there. I think you could go out there and hit balls maybe for the rest of your life and never get one to do that again. It was amazing.
Yeah.
They call it a game of inches, and there's a great example of that. And the Dodgers center fielder did what any good outfielder would do. He threw his hands up, and in the World Series they have 6 umpires. So there's one down the left field line, one down the right field line. So, in a normal game, the umpire wouldn't have as good a view. These umpires were on the run out there, when they saw the ball was over the fielder's head. And it was the right call, unfortunately, for the Blue Jays. But it cost them a run and probably a runner on third with nobody out. Who knows then what happens,
Yep. But you never know, because there were situations where you thought, oh, the Blue Jays are going to come through with a guy on third base and less than 2 outs. And the Dodgers kept on finding ways. So,
they did. And, even at the end, the fly ball where the guy crashed into his own left fielder and somehow caught the ball to end the inning. It was unbelievable. That I figured it's over his head or it's going to drop out of his glove when they collide, and the winning run's going to score, and he held on to it.
As a fan, do you remember anything more dramatic than those 7 games? Because I don't.
Well, I'm thinking back to some of the World Series that I was in. all three World Series I was part of when I was with St. Louis, 82, 85, and 87, were all 7-game World Series. The most dramatic moments for me personally ever were Game 5 and Game 6 of the National League Championship Series in 1985. And we were in St. Louis playing the Dodgers, and Ozzie Smith hit the first home run he had ever hit left-handed in his career off Tom Niedenfuer for a game winner in Game 5. It was a great call by the legendary Jack Buck, the longtime Cardinal broadcaster, telling the fans to go crazy, and they did. And then, we flew to Los Angeles, and we were down 2 runs in the 9th inning, and Niedenfuer pitching again, and Jack Clark in Game 6 hit a 3-run homer to win that one. We still had to get 3 outs, which we did, but for 2 back-to-back days, what a roller coaster of emotions. Probably more of the playoffs than the World Series, I would have to say.
Wow. And you know what's something funny about that, because that's 40 years ago, that was the very first NLCS and ALCS that was 7 games, because
That's right.
it just moved that year.
Well, I also, we could talk about the 85 World Series, something that wouldn't happen nowadays. The Cardinals actually took the lead going into the 9th inning, 1-0 in Game 6 over in Kansas City. And there was a play at first base, and the umpire, Don Denkinger, who was a longtime American League umpire back when they had American League and National League umpires, he was umpiring first base, and he called the base runner safe at first, and the guy was out literally by 2 feet, and every replay showed it, but there was no replay allowable in those days, and that may have cost the Cardinals the World Series. A couple other things that happened, a drop pop-up, and we didn't hit very well the last few games of that series. So we didn't help ourselves either, but that call at first, that was a hard night.
So tell me about the momentum in 1985, because what was that final Saberhagen pitched? It was like 11-0 or something.
Yeah. Well, I think the heart was sort of taken from the Cardinal players in Game 6. I think with that call, the feeling was gone. Whitey Herzog, our Hall of Fame manager, he never had very many team meetings. And he had a meeting before Game 7, and you could tell he wasn't really comfortable doing that. It wasn't his style. And you could almost look in the players' eyes and know they weren't real comfortable with the whole situation. And I even commented to someone on the bus going back to the hotel after Game 6. I said, I think this might be over with, because I saw the shell shock looked in the guy's eyes in the clubhouse after the game. I mean, you think about this, Bryan. We had the trophy in there, the cameras were in there, the champagne, the beer, everything. We're 3 outs away. You got to set all that stuff up. And now we got to tear all that plastic down and get that stuff out of there, hopefully before any player can come in and even see it. But you can't get it all out of there. And there were guys in there getting ready to pinch hit, or guys that had been removed from the game that saw all this. And I think the frame of mind was rough. And the next day, things just didn't work out right from the start, and it just got worse. And as you said, Saberhagen, our only hope was he and his wife had a baby that morning. He was only 21 years old.
Wow.
And I was hoping that maybe that would just be enough in his mind that he wouldn't have his best stuff, but he thought otherwise. He dialed up a gem for sure.
So I got to tell you this: your stories are absolutely fantastic. I'm going to go back more to what you were thinking in 1985 there and where exactly you were, because I know in 2008 you were in the dugout.
Yes.
When the Phillies won.
Well, I was in the dugout in 85 too, because, part of our job is to clear off the bench, especially if there's a clinching game like that. Guys are running out there, into the big dog pile in the middle of the field, and there's jackets and gloves, and, we don't care too much about hats, but, other things, that are just getting dropped on the ground, and you don't know if fans are going to be jumping out onto the field and things like that. So our job was to secure the equipment and, the bats, the helmets, and all the gear in the dugout. So we're out there for the last inning, and to see it go that way, well, it was tough.
So were you a part of the plastic crew though too?
Oh yeah, in there helping put it up, measuring it all out, putting it up. Then you've got it all down around all the lockers, and you go out to get the gear out of the dugout. I wasn't the only guy. I mean, there were 4 of us that day. Rip Rowan, who's been with the Cardinals forever, he's still there, and my former co-workers, Buddy Bates and Jerry Risch. The 4 of us were all out there. We want to see the last out. We're fans. We want to see our guys win, and hug each other, or the players or the manager or whatever. But we also had a job to do, and then a couple of us manned the dugout, and we knew there weren't going to be any fans on the field, so we took care of that end, and the other guys and the visiting clubhouse staff got all the plastic down, and hid all the beer and the champagne and everything.
That's so interesting to hear. So let me ask you one more question before we go ahead and take a break. When we're looking at all 6 World Series that you were in, which one? Of course, I'm sure the bookends for you were well, not really the bookends, because you were there in 09, right?
Correct.
So I'm sure that 82 and 08 were probably the most exciting for you, because those were your victories. And then the other 4, which one was I don't want to ask which one was the most exciting, because I'm sure they both were in different ways. Which one was the most devastating?
Oh, without a doubt, 85 was the hardest one. The 87 series, this game 7 was a very close game. That was a weird series. In 85, the Cardinals won the first 2 games of that series on the road, and actually had a 3-1 lead in the best of 7 and lost. And that was the first time that a team had won games 1 and 2 on the road and lost the World Series. And in 87, we had another mark of distinction that we didn't care for. We were they used to alternate every other year, home field, advantage. So it was American League's turn in 85. 86 was National League. 87, now it's Cardinals in Minnesota. The home field was Minnesota. That was the first time that a series went 7 games that the home team won all 7 games. So Minnesota won all 4 at the Metrodome, and we won all 3 at Busch Stadium. So it was a strange series. But, in 09, losing to the Yankees, we lost in 6 games. They had a great team. We had a great team too. But, we had been there. We played a lot of extra games in 08. All the way through to Halloween, and won the World Series. And then we played a whole bunch more extra games in 09. And I think the guys were kind of worn out by then, honestly. It's hard to win back to back. And It's a great accomplishment to win your league championship and to be in the World Series, but it's still tough to lose too.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. I have so many more questions just about the postseason, just the ballparks, and your job in general. So let's go ahead and take a break. This is Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks with Frank Coppenbarger. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. My name is Bryan Anthony Davis. I am here with Frank Coppenbarger. It's his show. He's usually the host, but today I'm interviewing Frank, and I love these shows because I have all these fanboy questions, Frank, that I've got to ask, and I love it. We're going to talk more about the postseason since the postseason just ended, but let me ask you this. Ballparks. We were just talking about the 1987 World Series in Minnesota. That ballpark, they used to call it the Hefty Bag.
Yeah.
What kind was that? One of the worst facilities you've been to, or was it not as bad as everybody said?
Well, it was great because it was indoor baseball when it was snowing outside Minneapolis. So from that standpoint, it was good. But it was one of those, air domes that was, basically held up by air inside. And it was an interesting place to say the least. It was kind of tough for the guys that had never played there before to see the balls, the pop-ups and the fly balls into the roof were difficult for them. The noise was an amazing decibel level. In fact, everybody in the Cardinal traveling party, wives, girlfriends, family members, they gave them a little packet of stuff when they went to Minnesota. And among those things were earplugs because the noise was really loud. And it wasn't the greatest ballpark, no, but that's where it was. So you got to play where they say to be.
All right. So in all your post seasons that you played in, you've been to different ballparks, and I believe Tampa Bay was one of them, right?
It was, yes.
So that ballpark, that's always that was an older ballpark before they even started there. I've heard many things about that ballpark. What was the deal with that? Was it called Tropicana? Was that
Tropicana Field? Yes.
Okay.
And they light it up orange when they win, so it looks like a big orange.
Oh, interesting. Was that a facility that a lot of people, because you always heard about that facility not being the best, but how was that?
Well, it's an interesting place. When I was with St. Louis and then later on with the Phillies, we trained with the Cardinals for many years in St. Petersburg, where the ballpark is now, only about a mile and a half from there, actually. And then the Phillies have been in Clearwater since 1947. So going to St. Pete was, commonplace all the time in spring training. And for years, there was just a circle of stone or cement columns in the ground, nothing else. It looked like their version of Stonehenge, I guess you could say. They were talking about building a stadium, but they didn't have a team, and they didn't finish it up. It sat for a long time. Then all of a sudden, there was some rumors that they were going to get the Giants. Then they were going to get the White Sox. None of those materialized. And lo and behold, they built the ballpark anyway. They first used it for hockey. The Tampa Bay Lightning played games in there. And then it was called the Florida Suncoast Dome at that time. Same place, though. And then after that, they got the Rays there in '98 as an expansion team. So, it's an okay place. It's not. It's an older one. The concourses are small. It's not the modern style ballpark when you can go to the concession stand and still turn around and see the field. It's nothing like that. But that was their ballpark, and it was an indoor place. So, it rains a lot down there in the summertime, and that helped them. Although, ironically, this year they played in the minor league ballpark, the Yankees ballpark over in Tampa, and they didn't have one rain out, which is amazing.
Wouldn't you know?
Yeah.
So speaking of the Yankees, the next year after that trip, that winning trip, you go to Yankee Stadium, but not the iconic Yankee Stadium, the brand new Yankee Stadium. Were players bummed that they weren't going to be in the house that Ruth built?
I don't think they cared about that, honestly. A lot of us had been there because of interleague play. We had played the Yankees a number of times at the old stadium. But I think they liked the new one. They made it to try to look as close to the old one as they can with all the modern touches. Like the clubhouse is incredible. The dining room in there reminds you of like a really nice restaurant almost. In the actual visiting clubhouse, and I'm sure the home clubhouse dining room's even nicer.
Wow.
Yeah, really nice place. Not the old place, but I think the ghost made their way across the parking lot. Though there's definitely some mystique about playing the Yankees and playing at Yankee Stadium and the monuments and just all the famous moments in baseball history that the Yankees have been part of. Makes it tough to win there.
Wow, that's fantastic. I've heard amazing things about I think it was just called Royal Stadium back when you played in '85. I know it's Ewing Kauffman Stadium now, but what that had a very interesting center field.
It did, with the fountains out there, and they had like a light show and the fountains going all the time, and home run balls that go in the water, and that kind of stuff. Now they've sort of enclosed it. They still have some of that, but they've enclosed it a lot. There used to be like some berms out there in the outfield above the bullpens and above the bleacher seats. Now it looks different, and it's right next to the Chiefs Arrowhead Stadium, which is called something else, I think.
GEHA. I think it's
Yeah.
Geha or Geha,
Yeah.
something like that now.
Don't know what that's for, but they've got a big sign on top of the roof. I
Probably
know
a financial
Yeah.
institution or something like
Somebody
that.
with a lot of money.
Yep, absolutely. The Chiefs and the Royals playing in different parks, but a lot of the teams, like the Cardinals, they both played in Busch, both Cardinal teams, and a lot of people don't realize that all the way up until 87, 88 was the first season when the Cardinals went to Phoenix. What was it like sharing a field with another team? And you did that as well in Philadelphia with the Eagles at Veterans Stadium.
Very true. It was different in St. Louis. They had clubhouse, the football Cardinals, as they were called there. There was a baseball Cardinals and the football Cardinals. The football Cardinals locker room was sort of on the third base side next to the visiting clubhouse. The baseball team was on the first base side, and then the visiting football locker room was next to our locker room or our clubhouse. We had an AstroTurf field when I was there. Originally, it was a grass field, AstroTurf field. And so it was an interesting situation because a lot of times the training staff for the football team would go out there and put adhesive tape down for like sidelines and yard markers for practice. And then they do that every day and then take it up and we'd have batting practice. So the football team would practice in the morning. They would have all that stuff on the field. And, by 1:00, 1:30, they were done. They'd tear all that tape up, throw it away, and do it all over again the next day. And then a lot of times they would bus or maybe they let them drive their cars. I don't know. I never really paid attention. There was a famous park in St. Louis called Forest Park. It's still there. Sometimes they would go there and practice on grass. It was about maybe a 10-minute drive from the ballpark. So it was a different situation in St. Louis. In Philadelphia, again, an AstroTurf field, little different setup. I don't know why they did this, but they put the Eagles locker room next to our locker room, and they decided they could have one bathroom, one shower, one sauna, and both teams could share it. And I know the people that built the stadium were thinking, well, the two teams won't be there at the same time. They didn't realize football guys are there year round. They're there training all the time. They're practicing. They have mini camps. They have all that stuff. And yeah, there's no games going on at the same time, but there's plenty of activity. So wasn't the best layout. The Eagles had like a bubble out in the outfield, beyond the outfield wall of the vet, and they would go in there and practice. And that was kind of their setup. I know the Steelers. I remember when we'd go play in Pittsburgh at Three Rivers, there would be a small grass field 3 or 4 blocks away that the Steelers used. I remember seeing that they had a goal post set up and all that. So different times for sure.
Well, I'm going to bring them up in a second because my next question is about relationships between the two teams with different sports. Because when we talk about the great 1979 season, the City of Champions in Pittsburgh, during the World Series, you can see games with when the Steelers were playing where Lynn Swann had the Pirates on the sideline. He's wearing the Pirates hat with all the Stargell stars on it. Yeah. The Steelers would take batting practice even during the World Series with the Pirates. They'd be taking batting practice. They would go support each other. That very same season, the Willie Stargell is in Pittsburgh wearing a cowboy hat, watching them play Houston in that famous AFC Championship game. They supported each other like crazy.
Yeah, I think the players always did that. Whether it was here in Philadelphia or in St. Louis. I know in St. Louis, as I mentioned earlier, the Cardinal football team would practice. They'd get done, they'd watch film and stuff like that, maybe after practice, or they're getting some treatment. And it wasn't unusual to have Dan Deerdorf and Pat Tilley and Jim Hart come down to the clubhouse, and they were done for the day, so they'd get over there in that beer cooler, which was always stocked up with Anheuser-Busch products, especially since they owned the baseball team. And they'd come down there and have a cold beer and shoot the breeze with the baseball guys. And we had the same thing with the football players, with the Eagles here in Philadelphia. And I know the players like each other. There weren't always great love affairs with the organizations because, who's responsible for the upkeep of the field, the stadium, all those sorts of, things happen. Now they all have their own facilities. And I know in the case of Philadelphia, the Eagles and the Phillies support each other very well.
I want to ask you another question that is probably, it's away from the World Series and everything, but it's just about your job. Are you responsible for getting the jerseys sewn back with a new player coming in, like with the names on them? How does that go?
Well, yes, I used to be when I was working. Now I'm not responsible.
I know that.
But the equipment manager, clubhouse manager, that's part of his job. Now, a lot of guys have learned how to sew over the years, and I also did. and I bought a sewing machine, and then I went to a sewing business, and the lady was kind enough to give me some lessons, and I just kind of learned how to do it. I learned it more so for repairing, mending uniforms than putting names on. But occasionally you have a patch or something like that. Then I got to where I could put some names on, but it's time consuming. So you got to find somebody in every town that can do it. It's not always easy. We've had some close calls, but I'm really proud that in the 28 years that I was responsible for the Phillies clubhouse, we never had a guy go out there without his name and his number on his back. There were some close ones. We got a player from the Dodgers once when we were in Dodger Stadium, and I got word of it about 4:30, and I didn't know how to sew, and nobody with the Dodgers knew how to sew. And there was a sporting goods guy there that was from LA, and he took that jersey and the lettering and the numbers to his business across town at rush hour, got the jersey sewn and got it back. And our guy stepped in the batter's box to lead off the game for the Phillies with about 10 minutes to spare. So there's some close calls, but yeah, that's you like to have as much notice on that as you can.
I was going to ask you that next about the notice. As soon as a transaction's made, how soon do they tell you?
Well, sometimes they tell you right then, and sometimes I've known some of my counterparts that have been surprised when the guy walked in the clubhouse and with his duffel bag, and you're like, "What are you doing here?" So fortunately, I had great general managers and assistant GMs that were considerate and letting me have the best chance to get my part of the job done too.
All right, Frank, I love these shows because I like to, of course, I love hearing we have Hall of Famers, we have the ring designers, we have so many different walks of life from baseball here. But I do love interviewing you as much, and I think I've done more interviewing with you not on the show, just on the phone asking you questions, because I love how the cake is baked. So this is really interesting. Nobody thinks about, hey, we got to get that guy in a uniform real quick.
No, they don't think about it. It's like fantasy baseball. You just trade a player or you acquire a player, but you don't think about he's got a wife, he's got kids, he's got a house, he's got a car, all that stuff needs to be moved. He needs to find a place to stay. Oh, wait, what do you mean that there's a citywide convention and no hotel rooms available? There's a lot of things that go on that people have no idea.
All right, that's fantastic. I know we're running late. I got to ask you this. In the history of the two teams that you worked for, what's your favorite uniform?
That's an unfair question. I can't answer that one. They're both very nice. You talking about our own home uniforms or like the Philly uniform versus Cardinals, you mean?
No, I'm talking about, I grew up with the more maroon, dark red Phillies.
Oh, well, no, I'm more the current version, the red, white, and blue. And Philadelphia colors all the way.
I really like those baby blue on both the Cardinals and the and the Phillies.
That was the thing back in the 70s and early 80s. And then around 83 or 4, it switched over to gray.
Right there, right around there.
Everybody, yeah.
I believe it was either 84, 85. I think 85.
Probably, yeah.
I think that's when it started. But
yeah.
Very interesting. It was so great to talk to you, Frank. We will go ahead.
Too. You were a good pinch hitter for a Hall of Famer today.
Yeah, I know, and I'm in nobody's Hall of Fame, but that's,
well, you're in mine. But Jim Cott, a Hall of Fame pitcher and broadcaster, unfortunately was feeling ill and let me know yesterday that he wouldn't be able to do the show. But we're going to get him back on here, and we sure hope he's feeling better. But Bryan, you did a great job, and thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We have a fantastic show coming up next week that I'm really excited about. And do you want to preview it?
Yeah, I'd like to. My job primarily, my career was in the clubhouse. I was the director of travel for 18 years also, but primarily I was hired to be a clubhouse manager, and the Major League Baseball Clubhouse Manager Association is having their very first Hall of Fame class. Seven gentlemen that were longtime guys, nobody less than 50 years on that list, are going to be put in the MLB CMA Hall of Fame, and it's going to be done up in Cooperstown, New York. And the Baseball Hall of Fame been gracious enough to hang that plaque in their exhibit for our guys, and I'm going to be up there and really looking forward to it, and it's going to be a great day. And our show next week will talk all about that, and we'll have one of those seven as our guest.
Well, I'm jealous, and I keep looking for my invitation, but I guess you're taking the wife instead. All right.
Unfortunately, I'm not taking her, and that's our wedding anniversary.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
I have to credit her for being such a great wife that she gave me a hall pass to go for a couple days. She knew it was pretty important.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear. All right, Frank, you know what? It's your show. Even though I was hosting, you got to take us out.
Well, that's it for this week. Be sure and like, follow, and subscribe to Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks and the Fan First Sports Network, and we'll be back next week with another exciting show.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks with Frank Coppenbarger. Tune in next week for another great episode on the Fans First Sports Network.